Welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of He Was a Warrior Who Wields a Hammer. He goes back 20 years ago to save the world from destruction. You can watch the previous part on this channel. I put a link in the description below. Let's continue the story. Raven topples backward onto the ground, while the Duke reprimands Drexler for his actions. The Duke questions Drexler's motives for performing a dangerous move, explaining that he wanted Drexler to showcase Raven's abilities instead. Raven looks up at them and confidently points out a cut on Drexler's cheek as evidence of his victory. The Duke shifts his attention to Drexler and notices the cut. Drexler remembers that Raven had charged in during his attack, resulting in the injury. The Duke expresses his anger at Raven's reckless move, concerned that he could have been seriously hurt. He questions Raven about why he would take such a risk just to win a duel. Raven, getting up from the ground, responds by saying that he didn't get killed and that he won the bet. The Duke wonders if Raven lived so recklessly in his past life, to which Raven confirms and explains that he had no other choice because he lived on the streets. Raven emphasizes that he had to go to great lengths to achieve anything, and winning this bet was no exception. Raven asks the Duke for his opinion on whether he managed to showcase his abilities, to which the Duke responds positively, acknowledging that what Raven did was remarkable and even beyond his own capabilities. The Duke speculates that perhaps his future self saw potential in Raven's audacity and took a chance on him. The Duke assures Raven that he will fulfill his promise and provide him with what he currently needs the most. Raven expresses his gratitude and then falls back onto the ground. When Raven wakes up, he finds himself in his bed with the Duke nearby. Raven asks about his whereabouts, and the Duke explains that Raven recovered faster than expected. The Duke informs Raven that they have much to discuss and invites him to come along. Curious about the passage of time, Raven asks how long it has been since their duel. The Duke informs him that it has been about half a day. Raven then asks if the Duke brought a highly skilled priest to aid in his recovery. Princess Khloe sees them walking in the castle and mentions that she had just healed Raven a little while ago. She wonders if her father has something planned that could potentially harm Raven again. The Duke assures her that he wouldn't harm someone who saved his daughter. Raven questions whether he truly saved her or if it was the other way around. Princess scolds Raven, reminding him that he was brought back from a serious condition and should be aware of that. Raven admits his fault for being too ambitious and apologizes to the princess for causing her worries. Princess kindly pats his head and encourages him to act more like a child. The Duke, noticing their exchange, tells Raven to stay away from his daughter. Raven explains that he was merely surprised when the Duke mentioned that he had saved his daughter because in his past life, they didn't actually meet the Black Magician and defeat her together. The Duke asks if it never happened in the previous life, and Princess asks what they are discussing. The Duke assures her that it's not important and promises to tell her if necessary. He changes the topic to the upcoming coming-of-age ceremony, mentioning that he has prepared everything and hopes she will enjoy it. Princess walks away with a bit of disappointment, saying okay. In the Duke's office, he reminds Raven of the advice he gave him and emphasizes the importance of keeping his arrival from the future a secret. Raven assures him that he has no intention of revealing it, especially to the priests. The Duke explains that the flow of time and space is crucial for destiny and is set by the Creator, and even the avatars who oversee all living things cannot alter it. Disturbing the timeline is like disrespecting the avatar, which is why their family has kept the existence of the Tempest a secret. The Duke acknowledges that it's understandable for Raven not to know about these things since the books that mention these details have disappeared. He mentions that the information is now found in only one book, which is passed down in ancient families, hence the need to limit who knows about it, like the 10 holy knights of the continent. Raven assures the Duke that he had no plans to abandon those knights and is determined to use his knowledge of future technology to make them stronger. The Duke acknowledges Raven's plan and asks about the skill the future Duke utilized. Raven playfully scolds the Duke, suggesting that he should provide him with what he needs the most before asking for a favor. He teases that perhaps the Duke has gotten too old and forgetful. The Duke playfully punches Raven's head and grabs his ear, telling him to improve his manners. As a result, Raven tumbles backward onto the ground. The Duke fulfills his promise and proceeds to share a special skill with Raven, reserved only for the head of the Valencia family. He asks Raven if he is familiar with a power called gravity, while Raven is dozing off. The Duke taps Raven's head and questions why he's falling asleep before they even begin. Raven requests the Duke to stop hitting him, and the Duke advises him to listen attentively. The Duke explains that his family has a special tradition consisting of 4 main parts: mana control, a sword technique combining offense and defense, attribute acquisition methods from levels 3 and 4, and aura attribute acquisition methods from level 7. Raven excitedly asks if there are 4 more parts to the tradition, suggesting that it may explain why Valencia was doing so well. The Duke confirms Raven's assumption and adds that, since Raven prefers using a blunt weapon, he may not need to learn offensive sword moves. Raven expresses his preference for a strong hammer over a wobbly stick. Raven has been yearning for something for a long time and really wants to learn those special defensive moves, as it would greatly improve his attacking and defending skills. However, the Duke mentions that there is another big secret to Valencia's tradition, which involves learning special abilities in auras. The Duke intends to teach Raven how to obtain these special abilities, surprising Raven and leading him to question if it's not about defense. In another scene, the elves are mourning the death of Irina, considering her as their special sword meant to defeat Elbenheim. They suspect that a child from the Morse family might be responsible and decide to gather information while being cautious not to alert the Empire. The leader of the elves reminds everyone that their primary task is still Karen's mission. Returning to the training session between the Duke and Raven, Raven is exhausted and asks if the attribute acquisition method allows him to choose his desired attribute. The Duke confirms this, but then recalls a decision he made when Raven fell during their practice fight and the Duke had to lift him. The Duke reminds Raven that, even though he's a child, he's heavier than the other knights. The Duke asks Raven if he remembers creating his own special mana body in his previous life. Raven affirms that he does. The Duke asks Raven to reflect on something. In his previous life, didn't the Duke wear heavy armor? Raven recalls that the Duke indeed wore heavy armor. The Duke explains that the heavier a person's body, the slower their movements become. In simple terms, if someone carries a lot of weight, their movements are affected by a natural rule called gravity. The Duke asks Raven if he understands why this happens. Raven asks why, and the Duke elaborates that gravity is a force in the world that makes things fall towards the ground. He mentions that when someone obtains the gravity attribute, they can become faster and stronger based on their weight. The Duke asks Raven for his thoughts and if he's becoming interested. The Duke emphasizes that regular experts who only add attributes cannot come close to this special force. While the Duke was providing further explanations, Raven found himself increasingly drawn to the information. However, Raven expressed their confusion by bluntly asking the Duke, "What on earth are you talking about?" This question caught the Duke off guard, as he realized Raven didn't comprehend his explanation. The Duke insisted that Raven listen attentively as he continued to elaborate, stating that the land masses possess a powerful force that pulls objects downward. In response, Raven sarcastically remarked that the Duke must have consumed something awful to spew such nonsense. Raven further questioned why people weren't sprawled on the ground, kissing it if this force was indeed present. The Duke feigned laughter, realizing that Raven hadn't grasped his intended meaning. The Duke, frustrated, asks why things fall to the ground, and Raven responds that it just happens without overthinking it. This infuriates the Duke, and he pulls Raven's ears while calling him a strange thinker. In pain, Raven calls for help, and the Duke tells him that it won't work, urging him to accompany him. And the scene transitions to Raven hanging from a tower's window while the Duke holds him outside. The Duke suggests that perhaps Raven will only understand if he experiences gravity physically. Raven's special power, mana, starts to freeze, and the Duke asks again why a person falls when they climb to a high place. With a trembling voice, Raven responds, "Gravity." The Duke drops Raven from the top of the tower, instructing him to feel gravity with his body. In a desperate moment, Raven activates his iron body and calls for help from Lunar Wolf, as he believes he's going to die. Lunar appears on the ground just as Raven is about to land. Raven apologizes to the wolf and cushions Raven's fall, causing both of them to tumble to the ground. The Duke arrives and asks Raven if he now understands the power of gravity. Raven replies that he definitely felt it all over his body. The Duke jokingly remarks that dropping Raven from such a height demonstrated the power of gravity, but Raven didn't get hurt. The Duke then asks if Raven can control gravity now. Surprised, Raven asks what the Duke means. The Duke explains that it seems they need to repeat this process a few more times for Raven to learn. Raven asks if the Duke can't just explain it with words instead, but the Duke declines, stating that Raven will learn better by experiencing it physically. The Duke drops Raven from the tower once again. The next thing Raven knows, he wakes up in a bed with Princess Khloe sitting nearby. He asks her where he is. The princess is relieved that Raven has awakened and praises him for his incredible progress. She heard that Raven had already become an expert. This news shocks Raven, and he asks if he's already an expert. He remembers the drops he experienced from the tower and wonders if they actually worked. The princess, surprised at Raven's progress, asks what kind of training he's been going through. She mentions that even though she's glad Raven has become the Duke's student, the training seems really tough. Raven wonders how anyone could call that training. The princess continues to praise Raven, saying it's incredible that he's already become an expert. She tells him that people are already talking about a genius showing up in the Blue Wing. Curious, Raven asks if it's right for the princess to be there with him. He adds that she must be busy preparing for her coming-of-age ceremony. The princess reassures him, saying she's not too busy, just practicing some manners and etiquette. Raven encourages her, saying he's sure she'll do great. The princess seems puzzled and asks him what he means. Raven clarifies that he's talking about her coming-of-age ceremony. The princess playfully taps Raven's head and tells him that, of course, she will do well, it's her special day, after all. Then she asks if it's obvious that she's feeling nervous. Raven responds that he thinks people close to her have already noticed. The princess questions this and adds that it's fine if it's Raven who noticed because they're like family now. Raven is surprised and confused. The princess explains that since Raven is learning from her father, they're like a family. She asks Raven to call her Nuna from now on. Raven wonders about this new title, and the princess asks why he's reacting like that. She says he should be happy as she's the daughter of a duke. Confused, the princess asks why he's laughing. The princess says that now that they're like family, Raven needs to keep it a secret. Raven agrees, and the princess tells him that Knight Drexler has been looking for him on the battlefield. Other knights are also present. Drexler and Raven stand face to face. Drexler is wearing armor and holding a shield. He says he heard that Raven has become really good at what he does. Raven, holding his weapon, agrees and asks why Drexler called him there. Raven notices that Drexler brought someone else along with him. Drexler tells Raven not to worry about the other person and then he drops his heavy hammer on the ground. He suggests having a practice fight to make up. Raven asks if they can do it without using any weapons, wondering if it's because of their last battle. Drexler confirms it, saying that he lost his cool during their previous fight and that wasn't very knight-like. Drexler challenges Raven to a match where Raven can attack freely. He challenges Raven to get used to his new strength. Raven smirks and agrees, saying if Drexler insists, he won't say no. Raven jumps forward to attack Drexler. Drexler tries to protect himself by using his shield, but the force of Raven's attack is too strong. Drexler is surprised, thinking if this is the same kid he met last week. Raven pushes Drexler back with a really strong force. Then Raven grabs his weapon. Drexler knows that even a small hit from Raven's weapon can hurt a lot, so Drexler tries to block Raven's weapon using his fist, but both of them get pushed back by a strong force. Drexler looks at his burned hand and wonders why it felt so hard and heavy. Raven keeps attacking Drexler, and Drexler tries to protect himself with a shield. Drexler is puzzled, thinking that Raven suddenly became faster. Other knights who are watching talk about Raven's weapon. They notice that Raven's mace looks quite heavy, and they wonder how a child can swing it so quickly. Drexler holds onto his shield tightly and realizes that maybe he doesn't need to hold back when facing Raven. Raven tells Drexler that he didn't want that to happen either. Drexler tries to attack Raven and warns that Raven should be ready. Raven defends himself and realizes he's getting the hang of Valencia's techniques. He notices that his swings feel lighter but hit harder when they land. Raven swings his weapon and goes on the offensive, but Drexler blocks his attack with a shield and sends Raven flying back with a strong force. Raven decides to utilize a battle technique known as Lightning Wallop. This technique involves a powerful strike that generates a massive explosion, surprising the other knights who are watching. They wonder if this display of power is the mark of an expert. The impact causes the ground to crack, and Drexler falls down. Drexler admits that he doesn't need to train Raven anymore, and Raven thanks him for his guidance. Drexler asks if Raven knows that he was going easy on him. Raven responds that there is still more to show, reminding Drexler that they are a spirit tamer. Drexler gets up, laughs, and tells Raven that they have passed the test. Drexler welcomes Raven to the Blue Wing. However, Raven tells Drexler that they don't plan to join the Knight's Order. Raven asks if Drexler didn't hear about this from the Duke. This shocks Drexler, and he asks Raven why they are making this decision. Raven tells Drexler that they don't plan on joining the Knight's group. Drexler is surprised and asks Raven why they learned the special technique of the Valencia family. Later, in the Duke's office, Raven is informed by the Duke that they forgot to mention something to them. The Duke thinks it's better for Raven not to be tied down to one place if they plan to travel the world. The Duke praises Raven for doing a great job and admits that Raven exceeded their expectations. Remembering all the times the Duke dropped them from the tower, Raven sincerely thanks the Duke. The Duke lets Raven know that they are almost done getting ready for the first big challenge. Raven asks if they're missing anything else, and upon noticing the word, almost, the Duke tells them that they're going to make an artifact warhammer for Raven. Artifacts are special weapons with long-lasting magic that can be very valuable and expensive, even costing a few years' worth of a knight's salary. Raven tries to decline, saying it might take a long time to make it. The Duke shares that they've been working on something for a few months. This surprises Raven, and they ask how the Duke knew they would need it. The Duke says it's a secret but reveals that it was originally meant to be a gift for Drexler, who has been working with them for a long time. Inside the best smithy in Valencia, called Rendell's Hammer, there's a skilled dwarf craftsman named Rendell. Rendell turned to Raven and sought confirmation, asking if he had heard correctly, that Rendell should indeed consider modifying the weapon to better suit someone of Raven's age and size. Rendell becomes very upset and says they'd rather cancel the deal and pay the penalty. They can't believe Raven is treating their craftsmanship like a child's toy. Raven remembers hearing that the dwarf craftsman aims to make a weapon that perfectly matches its owner, even if it means some loss. Raven realizes that Rendell is similar to Heinen. Feeling confident, Raven decides they need to prove themselves. They tell Rendell that they are even better than a knight of the super rare class. Rendell can't believe that Raven is an expert at such a young age. They think Raven might be using some kind of trick, so they use their special ability called Eyes of Judgment. This ability helps them figure out if someone is telling the truth by sensing their emotions through their words. The Duke realizes the truth and decides to let Raven see something. The dwarf asks Raven to wait for a moment and then shows them a hammer. Raven wonders if it's almost finished, and the dwarf explains that it still needs some adjustments. Raven notices that the hammer has a feature that restores itself automatically and another one that makes hits stronger. The dwarf mentions that they also need to work on its defense magic. Raven asks about offensive magic, and the dwarf points out that they seem more interested in defense. Raven clarifies that it's not like that, and the dwarf explains that not many artifacts have multiple magical functions like this warhammer. They say that only someone foolish would turn down an artifact with 3 magical abilities. The dwarf reveals that they actually have one more artifact warhammer available. It's just a heavy lump of squashed black iron with some special markings carved on it. The dwarf says that even the person who is supposed to wield it gave up on it. Raven gets really excited and says they like it. They ask about its other features, and the dwarf explains that it has the ability to make hits stronger and to fix itself automatically. Raven is eager to see it in action, and the dwarf demonstrates. Raven is thrilled, and the dwarf suggests that if they really want it, they should try lifting it. But it's really heavy, over 100 kilograms. Excitedly, Raven manages to lift it but then accidentally drops it. The dwarf gets worried and shouts that Raven might break the place. Raven hugs the hammer and calls it cool. The dwarf wonders if Raven is strange. Raven realizes that even though it's a bit different from their previous life's weapon, Nocturne, the warhammer called Stamp has some similarities. Raven asks if the handle can be adjusted to accommodate their growth in the future. The dwarf asks for payment, and Raven smirks, suggesting they ask the Duke for double payment. Finally, Raven asks about the name of the hammer, and the dwarf reveals that it is called Stamp. Raven shares this information with the Duke, who approves of the name and believes that Drexler will also like it. Raven informs the Duke that it will take the dwarf approximately 2 weeks to prepare the hammer. During that time, Raven decides to train and uses a saying from a different language to express that he can't even imagine becoming a superhuman Duke. Curious, Raven asks the Duke about the meaning of the saying. Raven mentions his interest in using expressions from Eastern languages as a hobby, and some people have even wondered if he belongs to a group called the Demon. The Duke finds Raven's humor amusing and praises his choice. The Duke advises Raven to continue using those expressions as it might help him hide the fact that he is not very intelligent. The Duke then contemplates the 2 weeks it will take to prepare the hammer and realizes that Raven will probably leave after Princess Khloe's coming-of-age ceremony. Raven asks the Duke if they will discuss what happened during the ceremony. The Duke asks if Raven is referring to the relationship with the imperial family, specifically the engagement with the Crown Prince. Despite knowing that the Crown Prince will die on the wedding day, the Duke intends to proceed with the engagement next summer. He shares that all the members of the royal family of Arsalan will die, leading to the decline of the empire known as the Second Catastrophe. The princess will be left with the unfortunate title of the Queen of Misfortune as a widow. The Duke reassures Raven that he is aware of this and can prevent it from happening. However, Raven reveals that even the 2 princes suspected of causing the catastrophe will also die. He adds that they couldn't figure it out in their past life either. Raven acknowledges that they don't have reliable information to go on. The Duke mentions that his daughter Khloe is intelligent and her abilities shine more than her looks, although the world is not yet aware of this. Raven predicts that eventually, the world will come to realize Khloe's capabilities. He suggests that Khloe will seek the Duke's assistance but ultimately solve the Empire's problems herself, even if she doesn't appear happy about it. The Duke expresses his determination to do what is best for his daughter and the world, vowing to prevent the bad events from occurring. Raven agrees not to interfere but promises to save Khloe in his own way if something goes wrong. The Duke playfully punches Raven's head, showing his protectiveness towards his daughter. Raven clarifies that he didn't mean any disrespect and asks why there are so many people around today. The Duke explains that there are only a few days left until Khloe's coming-of-age ceremony, and they are close to achieving their goal. They have worked hard thus far and are confident that everything will go smoothly. Janice Freewell, the Grand Master of the Blue Wing Knights Order, observes the group of visitors entering the castle from the Duke's office window. Janice notes that there are more young guests than expected for the special occasion, which he attributes to Valencia's good reputation. Janice promises to put in the effort to make the celebration a success. The Duke commented that the upcoming task would require a lot of effort. Janice added that in addition, the Rocher family had sent an envoy, specifically their 3rd son, who is known to be unpleasant. The Duke considers the Rocher Dukes to be one of the influential families in the Empire and competitors to the Valentia family. He expressed his surprise at the choice of sending someone like him to such an important event and instructed Janice to warn the envoy that he was in Valentia, not Rocher. Janice responded that they had actually made preparations for him in advance. The Duke questioned the truth of this and commended Janice for being a reliable person. Suddenly, the Duke's smile vanished, and he called Janice, who promptly turned to him. The Duke asked if Janice had some undisclosed illness. Confused, Janice inquired about what the Duke meant. The Duke was serious for a moment but then dismissed it as nothing. Changing the topic, the Duke mentioned that Janice didn't have to get overly concerned about Khloe's ceremony. However, Janice mentioned that Khloe was like a niece to him. The Duke informed Janice that she had also listened to him in the past and had considered him as one of her brothers. Abruptly, the Duke shifted the subject and asked if Janice had no intention of getting married. Taken aback, Janice remained silent for a moment and firmly stated that it would never happen. He reminded the Duke of his promise not to bring it up again, to which the Duke apologized and acknowledged his understanding. Janice commented that the Duke was behaving strangely today. The Duke attributed it to feeling uneasy because of his daughter's upcoming coming-of-age ceremony. He instructed Janice to leave him alone as he appeared occupied, and the Duke was left alone in his room. He clenched his hands and pondered about Janice's free will, considering that Janice had taken over his father's position after the old man's passing. The Duke recalled a conversation he had with Raven, where he asked if Raven was certain that he didn't know Janice in his previous life. Raven confirmed that he had never heard of him, but he was surprised when the Duke mentioned that Janice was already a Challenger class knight. Raven stated that if that were the case, there was no way he could be unaware of him. Returning to reality, the Duke considered the possibility that Janice might not be by his side in the future. However, he realized that neither did he have any illness nor was he planning to retire because he wanted to get married. Alone in his room, the Duke contemplated that it would be unlikely for someone like Janice, a 6th-stage mana user, to die easily in an ordinary battle. Then, the Duke's thoughts shifted to the second catastrophe, and he concluded that it must be due to that. Raven slams his weapon on the ground and thinks about Janice. He realizes that what the Sword Emperor had guessed makes sense, and it's likely that Janice might not survive Khloe's wedding day. Princess Khloe arrives, accompanied by Vivian. Raven asks if it's proper for her to be there and wonders if it goes against etiquette for her to talk to him this way. Vivian explains that she tried to stop the princess, but she felt frustrated being stuck in a room. The princess tells Raven that she enjoys hearing interesting stories when she's with him and likes seeing his lunar wolf. Raven asks if she wants to borrow Lunar, and the princess wonders if she can. They contemplate whether Lunar is already used to her. Then a man named Tyborn von Roche arrives and compliments the princess, claiming she is the most beautiful woman he has ever seen. He introduces himself as a member of the Roche family, a prestigious rival of the Valencia family. The princess becomes scared and asks if he said Roche. Tyborn confirms that he is indeed from the Roche family. The princess politely greets him. Tyborn suggests having a conversation to mark their first meeting and mentions that he brought some excellent drinks from his land. Raven doesn't like Tyborn and becomes curious about who he is. Vivian steps up to protect the princess and tells Tyborn to step back, explaining that the princess cannot meet any visitors until the special event is over. Tyborn notices Vivian and realizes she is a knight. He wonders how a woman dares to get involved while he is talking. He calls his guard, Graham, to handle the situation. Graham tells Vivian to step away, stating that this is a conversation between noble families' children. Vivian argues that the situation is absurd and shouldn't be happening. Graham insists that his master, Tyborn, is sincere and has held onto his feelings for years. He wants the princess to understand. Tyborn agrees with Graham and asks the princess for a chance. Raven notices that Graham seems more suspicious than Tyborn and decides it's a good time to repay the kindness they showed him. Raven refers to the princess as Big Sister and questions the two strange men. Tyborn notices Raven's black hair and questions who this kid is. He orders Graham to get rid of Raven. In response, Raven punches Tyborn in the face, sending him flying through the air. Raven tells Tyborn that he is quite skilled at getting rid of trash. Graham, angered by the situation, attacks Raven, but Raven punches him as well, sending him flying. Two men observe the scene from their window and wonder who the kid is that knocked out a knight with just one hit. They question Raven's identity and speculate that he might be a genius or a legendary monster. One of the men expresses interest in meeting the kid and mentions that Duke Valencia is raising such a powerful creature. The other man wonders if Duke Valencia and the Roche family are truly planning to become enemies of the imperial family. The first man agrees, saying that even Calendon wouldn't want that and suggests that they probably wanted to prevent Valencia from forming a connection with the imperial family. The first man expresses his disapproval of the underhanded strategy employed by the Roche family, stating that he doesn't believe Roger, presumably a member of the Roche family, can handle Duke Valencia, who has honed his skills in using his aura over many years. He believes that the king doesn't want the Valencia family to act independently and suggests that they should deal with Tyborn and Graham, presumably members of the Roche family, first. However, the second man disagrees and argues that there's no need for them to reveal themselves because the young masters from Valencia genuinely care for their younger sibling, presumably the princess, and are now back. The conversation shifts to Raven, who is in the office of the Duke, explaining the whole story to him. The Duke informs Raven that Tyborn has been kicked out by Rockshire due to his behavior, implying that using violence against Tyborn wouldn't be a problem. Raven sees this as a positive development, but the Duke becomes very angry, slamming the table and standing up, questioning Raven's thoughtlessness and warning him about the consequences of his actions. The Duke asks Raven if he wants to go to jail even before the Demon King army arrives, to which Raven responds negatively, explaining that Tyborn and Graham appeared suspicious. The Duke sits back in his chair, agreeing with Raven's observation. Raven asks if the Duke agrees with him, further infuriating the Duke, who asserts that Tyborn deserves to be punished severely for his behavior and sternly instructs him to stay away from the Duke. Raven leaves the Duke's office, reflecting on his own recklessness, and notices two boys running towards the office in a wild manner. Although Raven feels like he has seen them before, he struggles to recall where. As Raven tries to remember, one of the boys accidentally collides with him and falls down. Raven recognizes the boy as Tren, but he can't remember the other boy. The second boy looks at Raven in surprise because he witnessed Raven push Tren back, despite being a kid himself. The boy, named Aaron, observes the energy emanating from Raven and asks if he is Raven, the kid who fought Drexler. Raven humbly explains that they did have a fight, but Drexler wasn't giving his best effort, didn't use any special weapons. Aaron realizes that the rumors they heard about Raven were true. Tren acknowledges that he now understands why his father taught Raven a secret technique. Aaron mentions that they are in a hurry, and tells Raven they will see him again before rushing off to confront Tyborn and ensure he doesn't escape Valencia. Raven suddenly realizes that one of the boys is Aaron, who is destined to inherit the leadership of Valencia, which explains why he looked familiar. Raven wonders about the identity of the other boy since he only saw one young master in the future. Raven begins to contemplate whether he might meet the same fate as Janice, who dies. Raven believes that the royal family of Arslan is doomed, as the nobles highly value the bloodline of Arslan, which limits the number of guests at the Valencia event. Sarcastically, Raven dismisses the notion of the precious bloodline of the Golden Dragon. Two men who witnessed Raven's defeat of Tyborn and Graham approach him. They advise him to be more cautious with his words, and Raven asks for their identities. Raven observed that the man was wearing a false face, concealed by a magical disguise. Additionally, the man had forgotten to introduce himself. They introduced themselves as Baron Redley von Narsa and another unnamed man. Baron explains that he came as a guest to the princess's coming-of-age ceremony and wanted to meet Raven after hearing the rumors about his fight. Baron asks if Raven serves Lord Valencia, and Raven clarifies that he is staying with them temporarily. Baron expressed his belief that the Duke of Valencia seemed to have poor judgment when it came to assessing people. Raven found this statement to be impolite and pointed out that they were currently in Valencia. He asked Baron if he thought it was inappropriate to speak about the Duke in such a manner. Baron was taken aback by Raven's response. Baron laughs and suggests that since they have given each other advice, they are like friends now. He proposes treating Raven to a meal to celebrate their friendship. Raven contemplates whether he should learn more about Baron by fighting him but decides to heed the Duke's advice to be cautious. Baron mentions that he heard Raven is close to a lady and asks if he can meet her. Before Baron can finish his sentence, Raven slaps him hard, sending him flying through the air. Raven realizes that he is going to get scolded for his actions. The other man, who was with Baron, strikes Raven with his weapon, threatening to rip him apart. Raven demands to know the man's identity and notices that he is manipulating space with mana, indicating his formidable skill. The man taunts Raven, saying he will cut off his rude hand first. Raven realizes that his strong iron armor may not be sufficient to protect him against this skilled opponent. Raven summons his lunar wolf, and the man notices that the wolf is made of mana, deducing that Raven is a spirit summoner. The man briefly lowers his guard, allowing Raven to quickly punch him in the face with force, but the man remains unfazed, not budging an inch. The man seizes Raven by the front of his shirt, propelling him through the air. Raven lands forcefully on the ground, while the man readies his weapon for another attack. However, before he can strike again, Lunar steps in between them and absorbs the blow, falling to the side. Undeterred, the man raises his sword once more, declaring that it's all over for Raven. At that moment, Baron rushes forward and urges the man to stop, taking responsibility for the incident. In the office, Janice informs Raven that he had been eager to meet him, though he didn't expect their encounter to unfold in such a manner. Raven apologizes, and Janice acknowledges that the situation did seem peculiar. However, since Baron plans to forgive Raven, they decide to let the matter go this time. Janice advises Raven to remember an important lesson: Valencia is not a place for frivolity, and if someone is in disguise, it's because they have been permitted to be. Raven assures Janice that he understands. Janice expresses high expectations for Raven, stating that if he takes a moment to think before acting, he has the potential to become a remarkable individual. Raven realizes that this advice aligns with what the Duke had told him. Janice then mentions being busy and requests that Raven excuse him. Raven seizes the opportunity to ask Janice about the man named Landry, whom he just fought with. Raven is curious about Landry's identity and whether he is connected to the Imperial family. Janice realizes that he may have made a mistake and explains that it's unusual to encounter a skilled knight like Landry. Janice asks Raven not to share this information with others, to which Raven agrees, already having knowledge about the engagement. Raven surmises that Landry is likely an investigator from the Imperial family, as the upcoming coming-of-age event is when the prince's engagement is typically announced. A week after the coming-of-age ceremony, Janice made a decision to ensure that this day would be the most splendid for his younger sister, Khloe. However, his thoughts were abruptly interrupted by Raven, who was voraciously indulging in the food at the event. Raven inquired about the name of a particular dish, which irritated Janice and prompted him to urge Raven to exhibit some self-control. Janice kindly suggests that Raven eat slowly since there is an abundance of food. Raven, with his mouth full, insists that he is already eating slowly. Janice quietly murmurs a warning for Raven to stop eating before he injures his jaw, prompting Raven to inquire about Janice's comment. Janice quickly dismisses it, and he realizes that Raven, at his age, should be eating more, acknowledging that he should be more understanding. Baron enters the scene and requests a private conversation with Raven instead of Janice. Baron apologizes for their previous encounter and expresses admiration for Raven's decision-making. He assures Raven that if he messes up again, Raven should not hesitate to strike him once more. Baron acknowledges that there is no one else who would do such a thing for him. Raven begins to wonder if there is something amiss with Baron's behavior. The announcer announces the arrival of the main figure of the day, Khloe von Valencia, along with her family. Baron blushes upon seeing Khloe, commenting on her beauty. This irks Raven, causing him to contemplate whether he should let this incident slide or not. In the hall, everyone is captivated by Khloe's presence, and they marvel at her, questioning if she is truly real. Some even compare her to an angel from Valencia. Meanwhile, Khloe contemplates that if she successfully navigates through this day, things might change. Raven recalls the time when Khloe asked him to refer to her as his older sister from that point forward. He wishes for Khloe's happiness and summons his lunar wolf spirit, which approaches Khloe and affectionately nuzzles her. Khloe sits on her throne with the wolf in her lap. The Duke, surprised by the wolf's presence, questions why there is a dog there, initially thinking it might be part of a circus act. However, the wolf grows into its majestic form and takes its place beside Khloe's throne. People realize it's a spirit, and someone mentions that it looks like an angel with a mythical creature. Baron, impressed by the spectacle, thanks Raven for the incredible display. Raven becomes suspicious of Baron's behavior and silently promises himself that if Baron acts strangely again, he will slap him once more. The Duke steps forward and expresses gratitude for Khloe's well-being and growth. He also expresses a wish for Khloe's late mother to be present for this special moment. Emotions run high among those in attendance, with some shedding tears. The Duke then places a medal around Khloe's neck, marking the commencement of the main part of the ceremony. He announces that he will now introduce Khloe's future husband, conjuring a magical image of a man who identifies himself as Bradley Van Oslan. Bradley expresses his appreciation for having Khloe, the Angel of Valencia, as his fiancée. He apologizes for not being physically present. The Median is shocked and wonders if this is real. The projection of the Crown Prince is Raven. Raven wonders why Vivian is reacting like that, considering that Bradley is just a prince and his previous life ended without much significance. Baron Narsa says it's finally Raven's turn. Raven grabs Baron's hand and asks where he's going. Raven tells Baron that he doesn't think Baron should join in. Baron pats Raven's head and kindly says he understands that Raven is concerned about Khloe, but Raven doesn't need to act this way towards Baron. Baron Narsa tells Raven to read his name Narsa backward, and it becomes Aslan El, with the R sound similar in Korean. Baron transforms into Crown Prince. Bradley Van Oslan tells Raven that they'll meet again and walks away. Raven suddenly realizes it's the actual Crown Prince, and he panics as he slaps the Crown Prince. Raven worries if he's in big trouble now and wonders if he should let Bradley die during the wedding. Janice interrupts Raven's thoughts by asking what he's thinking. Raven makes an excuse, saying it's a bit hot. Janice assures him not to worry because Bradley has already forgiven him, and even if he hadn't, Raven is protected within Valencia's boundaries. Bradley goes onto the stage and respectfully takes Khloe's hand. Raven realizes that the one who defied the Emperor's wishes for a marriage alliance with Roger and strongly pushed for this engagement is the Crown Prince himself. Janice tells Raven that the Duke has a message for him, saying everything is ready, and after the ceremony, Raven should go see the Duke later at night. Raven goes to the Duke's office, and the Duke thanks him for the impressive spirit show, mentioning that it seemed to calm Khloe's anxiety. Raven replies politely and asks if everything is prepared. The Duke confirms that it is and admits that he still finds it hard to believe that the sacred item called Humanetas from Coronable has vanished. The Duke explains that the city Ortis is going to be attacked, not just by any normal monster, but by a giant sea creature known as a kraken. Raven suggests they should investigate further and checks the stamp paper, asking about it. The Duke assures him that the stamp is taken care of. Lastly, the Duke instructs Raven to visit the smithy the next day. At the smithy, the dwarf tells Raven that he's made all the magic waves in the weapon just the way Raven wanted. He's adjusted it for weight amplification, shock amplification, and auto repairing. Raven picks up the hammer, and the dwarf comments that the hammer has very strange features, and he's not sure what his son was trying to create. Raven holds the hammer up, looks at it, and says he finds it really useful. The dwarf then asks Raven to give the hammer a swing. Raven tries it and notices that it's very well balanced in terms of weight. While riding on Lunar, Raven goes through the woods, holding the hammer. He finds that it works perfectly, even better than he expected. Raven decides he should express his gratitude to the dwarf. Suddenly notices something in the sky and starts running faster. Raven wonders if it's because they're out in the moonlight. He realizes that Lunar is also in excellent condition, which is good because they'll reach their destination in a week. He tells Lunar that they should head to the port city of Annexon. Meanwhile, an elf reports to their leader that Raven has left the Duke's place, riding a strong spirit animal and moving way faster. In a carriage, the elf leader asks where Raven is going. The elf messenger informs that Raven is heading to the nearest port city that goes to Karun and Annexon. This news surprises all the elves there. The elf leader says this is a problem and they should take advantage of this chance to get rid of Raven. The leader orders handlers to be sent out. Raven notices these people and wonders who they are. The men tell Raven that it seems he doesn't realize the danger he's in. They heard that Raven is an expert who's acting arrogant, thinking he can handle 5 people of his level with just 1 spirit animal. Their leader says this is why kids need to be taught a lesson through a beating. So, these men tell Raven to let them, the Black Knights, teach him a lesson. They come towards Raven, trying to hurt him, but Raven easily avoids their attacks. The knights are surprised that the young kid could dodge a hit from someone at his level. One of the knights tells the others not to be scared and thinks Raven must have used some trick. He informs them that they are more than Raven. Raven talks back, saying all they do is talk nonsense. To teach them a lesson, he swings his hammer and says he's going to fight them with a strong hit. Raven knocks down one of the Black Knights and makes fun of them, saying they're not tough enough and compares them to insignificant bugs and devil worshippers. The Black Knights, realizing they are outmatched, try to flee, but Raven gives chase. Riding on Lunar, he confronts them, making it clear that they won't escape his wrath. As he dismounts from Lunar and raises his hammer, he declares that the Black Knights will meet their demise. With a forceful strike, he brings all the knights down, rendering them helpless on the ground. As the ground beneath him cracks, Raven stands tall and gazes ahead at the fallen knights. He is impressed, finding the scene just as amazing as he had imagined. Looking at his hammer, he believes he can continue using it until he grows older. Raven jumps back onto his lunar wolf and walks past the defeated Black Knights. He wonders how these knights knew he would be there and realizes he should have left at least one of them behind. However, his attention is drawn to something behind a tree, and he wonders what it could be. Suddenly, a massive twin-headed troll emerges from behind the tree, letting out a loud roar. Raven feels scared and wonders why such a rare and powerful monster is present. He realizes that compared to the creature, he appears extremely small. In this world, monsters are ranked based on their strength, and a rank 5 monster is considered extremely tough to defeat, requiring a powerful wizard or a rare mana user. Raven is confused about why a rank 5 monster is in this location. The monster tries to attack Raven while he is riding his lunar wolf, but he manages to escape. An elf standing next to the monster commands it to kill Raven, calling him a troublemaker who has bothered their group. The elf angrily orders the monster to crush Raven completely. Realizing that the powerful rank 5 monster was brought there by the monster trainer, Raven instructs his lunar wolf to go after the monster. However, the elf refuses to allow it. The troll crossed its arms, flexing its muscles, and let out a piercing scream. Gripping its axe with both hands, it launched an attack, swinging its weapon with a powerful black and red aura, cleaving through all the surrounding trees. Raven swiftly evaded the strike by swiftly dropping to the ground. The force of the attack was enough to send the uprooted trees flying, creating chaos on the battlefield. Raven realized that the troll had gone into a berserk state. Suddenly, the monster appeared behind him, attempting to execute an overhead slash with its axe. However, Raven swiftly evaded the attack and found the monster to be both annoying and possessing traits typical of a rank 5 monster, such as great regeneration and strength. Raven was aware that there was a limit to the troll's berserk state. As the monster swung its weapon at him again, he knew he needed to wait for the right timing. The troll sniffed the air, seemingly gathering energy, and released a fire-like poison towards Raven. Using his mana to shield his body, Raven stumbled and fell to the ground. The troll launched another attack, with only a small gap remaining before its weapon would reach him. Refusing to give up, Raven attempted to swing his warhammer, infusing it with mana. Realizing he couldn't dodge the troll's attack in time, he retaliated by striking the monster. The force sent the troll tumbling backward and crashing to the ground. Raven jumped toward the monster, smashing its legs with his hammer, causing it to scream in pain. Landing on a tree branch, Raven smirked and mentioned that it was time for weight and shock amplification, knowing it would be painful. Enraged, the monster faced him, seemingly seeking revenge, while its legs began regenerating due to its trait. Raven was shocked by the speed of the regeneration. The troll launched another attack, forcing Raven to leave his position and jump to another tree. From there, Raven leapt towards the monster, dealing another blow. In the distance, an elf observed the fight between Raven and the troll. In his mind, the elf taunted Raven, calling him an idiot and questioning how long he thought he could keep evading, warning that he would be finished if caught even once. As the monster continued its consecutive attacks, Raven kept jumping and dashing to avoid them. Suddenly, Raven found himself at a dead end, leaning against a rock and contemplating where to go next, while the enraged troll still held its weapon, emanating an aura. In the next moment, the berserk trait of the troll exceeded its time limit, causing the monster to become confused. The elf was taken aback, realizing that the berserk mode had already ended. Raven smiled, realizing that it had reached its limit, and stated that it was expected since the troll had regenerated multiple times. Hearing Raven's words, the elf was shocked, realizing that Raven had planned all of this. Suddenly, Lunar Wolf appeared and bit the man in his shoulder, pinning him to the ground. Raven praised Lunar Wolf for its good job. Raven then rushed towards the troll, commanding Lunar Wolf to hold the man still. Shouting, Raven jumped high to attack the troll, using his lightning wallop technique to cut the monster in two with powerful lightning, ultimately killing it. As the dust and smoke cleared, Raven held the two heads of the troll. In the next moment, he approached the man with the hood and demanded that he reveal what he knew. With no choice, the man divulged all his knowledge to Raven, who learned that the organization's headquarters was in the lawless city of the City Federation, with the mayor serving as their boss. The man confirmed this. Raven stated that it meant the two groups were not the same, which confused the man. Raven remembered the cursed chain on Wolf and speculated that they would have placed a curse on the beast trainer who controlled a rank 5 monster as well. The man remained confused. Raven asked if their plan involved stealing Karun's holy object, but the man adamantly denied it. However, Raven insisted that the man had guessed correctly and demanded the name of their leader, promising to spare his life. Raven allowed the man to contemplate his response. The scene shifted to the port city of Anaxon, where he walked through the streets whistling. Outside the city, an explosion materialized, causing the citizens to wonder about its origin. Someone speculated that it might be fireworks, unaware that it was the man with the hood who had controlled the rank 5 monster earlier. Raven recalled his conversation with the Duke, who had mentioned that everything was ready and they were waiting for him at the pub in Anaxon. Upon arriving at the pub, Raven questioned if it was the right place. As he entered, he was shocked to see the Sword Emperor and wondered if he was truly the reinforcement. However, the Duke placed his hand over his face, and in the next moment, the Sword Emperor transformed into the man with red hair, the owner of the pub. The man commented that their business didn't involve selling alcohol to little kids. Raven infused his eyes with mana, feeling puzzled by the man's changing face.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content. Feel free to leave a comment down below sharing your thoughts or suggestions. If you want to stay updated on all our latest uploads, click the notification bell icon. And hey, why not check out some of our other videos popping up on the screen right now? If you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It really means a lot. Peace.